My name is Jessica Rivera. I am 29 years old. I was sitting at the small desk in the corner of our living room in Tucson, the one I had turned into my makeshift office because the garage studio got too hot by noon when the numbers on the screen finally stopped making sense. The trust fund my parents had opened for me when I turned 18 was supposed to hold just under $50,000. I had never touched it. I had treated it like some kind of safety net I was too proud to use until the business actually needed it. Instead, the balance read zero, not a few dollars left from fees, zero. And the transaction history showed three separate transfers, all within the last 8 months, straight into an account I did not recognize at first. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then I clicked through the statements the bank had mailed me after I finally asked for paper copies. The transfers had been authorized with my name, but the signature on the forms looked nothing like mine. One of them had gone to an account under my husband's name. Another had a memo line that simply said family support. The third was even cleaner, just a date and an amount that made my stomach drop. $42,000 total, gone like it had never existed. I sat there for a long time with the air conditioner humming and the desert light turning everything outside a hard white. My first thought was not anger. It was a cold, sharp kind of clarity. Of course it was gone. Of course, the one thing I had been told was mine, and only mine, had been treated like community property the second it became useful to someone else. If you have ever sat in your own house and watched the ground you thought was solid turn out to be sand, someone else had already sold, you know the feeling. I did not scream. I did not call anyone yet. I just opened a new browser tab and started printing every page. My husband Andrew walked in from the garage around 6 still in the button-down he wore for client meetings. He dropped his keys on the counter and kissed the top of my head the way he always did when he wanted to seem like nothing was wrong. Long day, he asked, already moving toward the fridge. I waited until he had a beer in his hand before I spoke. The trust fund is empty. He paused with the bottle halfway to his mouth. Just a second too long, then he gave me that easy half smile he used when he thought I was overreacting to something small. Jess, we talked about this. Your dad said the account had some issues with the old bank. I moved what was left into something that actually earns interest. I was going to surprise you once it's settled. I turned the laptop so he could see the printed statements I had lined up on the table. The transfers went to your account and to one under my sister's name and to something called Southwest Equity Partners that I have never heard of. You used my name on the forms. Andrew set the beer down. He did not look at the paper. Your sister needed help after the divorce. She was going to lose her car, and the investment thing was supposed to be short term. I was going to put it back before you even noticed. You have been so stressed with the orders lately. I did not want to add more to your plate. My younger sister, Kayla, had been staying in our spare room for the past 4 months. She had shown up one night with 2 suitcases and a story about her ex draining their accounts. Andrew had been the one who said we could not just let her sleep in her car. I had agreed because that is what you do when your sister shows up crying. Now I was looking at bank records that said she had received almost $12,000 of money that was never hers to begin with. I kept my voice even. You forged my signature. He laughed once short and sharp the way he did when he wanted to make something sound ridiculous. Forged is a strong word. I signed for you a couple times when you were busy with the shop. You always said you trusted me with the boring stuff. Before I could answer, my phone lit up on the table, Kayla's name. Andrew glanced at it, and his shoulders relaxed a fraction, like backup had just arrived. I picked up the call and put it on speaker without thinking. Just Kayla's voice came through bright and a little too casual. Andrew said you might be freaking out about the money thing. I told him you would understand once he explained. It was only supposed to be temporary. I am going to pay you back as soon as the new job starts. I looked at my husband. He was watching me with that careful expression he wore when he thought he could still manage the room. Kayla, I said, did you know the money came from the trust fund Mom and Dad set up for me? There was a pause. Then she sighed like I was the one being difficult. Jess, you were never going to use it anyway. You always said the business was doing fine on its own. Andrew needed liquidity for that deal he was working on, and I needed to get back on my feet. We were going to tell you once everything was sorted, you make everything into a bigger deal than it has to be. Andrew reached over and muted the phone before I could answer. See, she is going to pay you back. We all are. This does not have to be a thing. I unmuted it. Kayla, I am going to need you to send me every text you and Andrew exchanged about moving that money, every single one. And I am going to need you out of the spare room by the end of the week. She made a sound that was half laugh, half disbelief. You are really going to kick me out over this after everything I have been through? Andrew said, you might pull something like this. He said, you have been looking for a reason to make yourself the victim again. Andrew's face changed then. The easy smile dropped. He reached for the phone and ended the call himself. We can talk about this like adults, he said, voice lower now. You are blowing one bad decision out of proportion because you are tired. Let me handle the finances for a while. You focus on the orders. That is what you are good at. I stood up. The printed statements felt heavy in my hand. I am calling Lena in the morning. She flagged the transfers when I asked her to look at the statements last week. She already has copies. His jaw tightened. Lena Patel had been my friend since we were both selling at the same weekend markets 3 years ago. She also happened to work part-time doing bookkeeping for a local credit union. Andrew had never liked how much I told her. You are going to drag our business into this, he asked. The word "our" landed like it always did, like he had earned equal claim on something he had only ever written checks for. It is not our business, I said. It is mine. And right now, I need to figure out how much of it you and my sister already spent. He stepped closer, not threatening, just crowding the space the way he did when he wanted me to back down. Jess, if you start throwing around words like spent and forged, things are going to get ugly fast. People are going to ask questions about why you let me handle everything for so long if you did not trust me. Your customers, your vendors, even your parents. I did not answer. I just gathered the papers, put them in the folder I kept for taxes, and walked toward the bedroom. He followed me as far as the hallway. You are really going to sleep on this? He called after me. We can fix it. We always fix things. I closed the door without answering. The lock clicked louder than I meant it to. In the dark, I lay on top of the covers and stared at the ceiling fan until the blades blurred. My chest felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with the slow, sick realization that this had been happening for months while I had been focused on packing orders and answering emails at 2 a.m. I had trusted the person who was supposed to have my back more than anyone else, and he had used that trust like it was a line of credit he never intended to repay. My phone buzzed once on a nightstand, a text from Lena. Lena, did you look at the statements? Call me when you can. I found something else in the deleted folder from the shared drive. Screenshots. They are bad. I did not reply right away. I just turned the phone face down and closed my eyes. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the air conditioner and the occasional sound of Andrew moving around in the kitchen. I could hear him opening and closing cabinets like he was looking for something to fix. He was not going to find it in there. I had built the business with late nights and farmers market tables and money I scraped together from every other job I could find. I had never asked him to rescue it. I had only asked him to stay out of the way when I said I wanted to keep the accounts separate. He had nodded and smiled and told me he respected that. Then he had waited until I was busy and taken what he wanted anyway. My younger sister had helped him. That part still sat in my throat like something I could not swallow. She had looked me in the eye at dinner 2 weeks ago and asked if I could front her first month's rent because things were tight. She had known exactly where the money was coming from. I reached for the phone again and opened the thread with Lena. My thumbs moved before I could talk myself out of it. I saw the statements. Send me the screenshots. The reply came back almost immediately. 3 images loaded one after another. They were text conversations between Andrew and Kayla. The timestamps went back almost a year. In one of them, Kayla had written, "She never checks the trust account anyway. Just move it and we can figure out the rest later." In another, Andrew had replied, "She trusts me with everything. It will be fine once the deal closes." I saved the images to a folder I labeled with today's date. Then I opened the Notes app and started typing everything I could remember about the last 8 months, dates, conversations, times Andrew had offered to handle the boring money stuff so I could focus on the shop. Every time my sister had cried on the couch about how hard things were and how grateful she was that we were letting her stay, when I finished, I put the phone on Do Not Disturb and set it on the floor beside the bed. The room was dark except for the thin strip of light under the door from the hallway. I could still hear Andrew moving around out there, probably rehearsing what he was going to say in the morning. I did not know yet what I was going to do. I only knew that whatever came next, it was not going to be another quiet conversation where he explained why I was overreacting, and I nodded because it was easier than fighting. For the first time in a long time, the quiet felt like something I had chosen instead of something that had been handed to me. The next morning, the desert light came in hard through the blinds, the way it always did in Tucson, when the temperature was already climbing past 90 before most people had finished their coffee. I woke up on top of the covers with the folder of bank statements still on the nightstand where I had left it. My husband Andrew was already up. I could hear him in the kitchen moving pans around like he was making breakfast the way he did when he wanted to act like everything was normal. I stayed in bed for another 10 minutes staring at the ceiling and listening to the low hum of the air conditioner. Then I got up, showered, and dressed like it was any other Wednesday. I packed 2 boxes of orders that had come in overnight, labeled them, and carried them out to the car without saying much. Andrew watched me from the doorway but did not offer to help. Kayla's door stayed closed. Around 10, I drove to the small coffee shop on the edge of the neighborhood where Lena Patel and I sometimes met when we needed to talk without anyone overhearing. She was already there at a corner table with her laptop open and 2 iced coffees waiting. Lena had been the one who first noticed the odd transfers when I had asked her to glance at my statements a week earlier. She had not said much at the time, just that I should get paper copies and look closer. Now she slid her laptop toward me as soon as I sat down. I pulled the deleted items from the shared drive you gave me access to, she said quietly, the ones Andrew thought he had cleared. There are screenshots of text threads between him and your sister going back almost a year. They are not subtle. I opened the folder she had labeled with my name. The first image was a chain from last March. My younger sister Kayla had written, "She won't notice if we move it in smaller amounts. She barely logs into that account." Andrew had replied with a thumbs up emoji, and then 2 days later, another message saying the first transfer had gone through. There were more, plans about what they would say if I ever asked, jokes about how I was too busy playing businesswoman to pay attention. One thread from June showed Kayla asking for an extra $2,000. Because her car repair had cost more than expected. Andrew had told her to take it from the business account and we will replace it before the quarter closes. I read through them without speaking. Lena waited, stirring her coffee even though it was already cold. He used your login on the shared drive to move files around, she said finally, and he changed the password on the trust account portal 3 times in the last 6 months. I have the audit had the audit trail. From the bank side, it is all there if you want to take it further. I closed the laptop gently. How much do I owe you for looking into this? Lena shook her head. Nothing. Just promise me you will not let him talk you into working it out again. I have seen this pattern before with other women who came into the credit union. It starts small, and then one day the account is empty and they are the ones being told they're crazy. We sat there for another 20 minutes while I copied the files onto a flash drive she had brought. She also gave me the name of a lawyer she trusted for situations like this, David Chen. She said he handled small business asset protection and had seen plenty of spouses trying to reach into accounts that were not jointly owned. When I left the coffee shop, the heat hit me like a wall. I sat in the car with the engine running and the air on full blast, staring at the flash drive in my hand. The bitter part of me wanted to drive straight to the bank and close every account Andrew had ever touched. The quieter part knew I needed to be careful. If I moved too fast, he would spin it as me being unstable. And some of our mutual vendors already thought I was the difficult one because I was the one who actually enforced deadlines. My phone rang while I was still sitting there, Andrew's name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then a text from my younger sister. Kayla, can we talk like adults instead of you running to your friends? Andrew is really upset. He said you are making this into something it is not. I did not answer. Instead, I called the number Lena had given me for David Chen. His assistant put me through after I said it was urgent and involved possible forged documents on a trust account. David's voice was calm and direct. He asked me to email the statements, and the screenshot said he could meet me the next afternoon and told me not to sign anything or move any money until we talked. When I got home, the house felt different. Andrew was in the living room with the television on, but the sound low. Kayla was on the couch with her feet tucked under her, scrolling on her phone. They both looked up when I walked in. Andrew stood. We need to talk about last night. You cannot just threaten to kick your own sister out and then disappear all morning. I set my bag on the table and pulled out the flash drive. I met with Lena. She found the deleted messages, the ones where you and Kayla planned how to move the money without me noticing. Kayla sat up straighter. Those were private conversations. You cannot just go through Andrew's things like that. They were on a shared drive he set up for the business, I said. The one he insisted we both have access to in case something happened to him. Turns out something did happen. He decided my trust fund was community property without telling me. Andrew ran a hand over his face. The easy charm from the night before was gone. Jess, you are acting like we stole from you. That money was sitting there doing nothing while you stressed over every order. I was trying to grow it. The investment did not work out the way I expected. That is on me. But you do not get to rewrite history and pretend you were the only one contributing around here. I looked at my younger sister. She would not meet my eyes. Kayla, you took almost $12,000. You asked me 2 weeks ago if I could front your rent because things were tight. You knew exactly where that money had come from. She shrugged, the motion small and defensive. You have the business. You have this house. You have Andrew. I had nothing after the divorce. It was supposed to be temporary. I was going to pay you back once I started the new job. Andrew stepped between us like he was mediating something that had gotten out of hand. Look, we can fix this. I will sign something saying I will repay the $42,000 over the next year. We can put it in writing. You can have your lawyer draw it up if that makes you feel better. But we do not need to turn this into some big legal thing that drags everyone's name through the mud. I almost laughed. The bitter edge in my chest sharpened. You want me to let you repay money you took from an account that was never yours in the first place, and in exchange, I stay quiet so your reputation stays clean. Is that the deal?" He did not deny it. He just looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable for naming it out loud. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from one of our mutual friends, a woman named Rachel, who sometimes helped me at markets when orders got heavy. I had not told her anything. "Rachel, hey, Andrew mentioned you two are going through some money stress and that you might be struggling with the business side of things. If you need help packing orders or just someone to talk to, I am around." No judgment. I read it twice, then I showed it to Andrew without a word. He glanced at it and had the grace to look uncomfortable for half a second. "I was just venting to her last night after you locked the door. She asked if everything was okay. I did not say anything that was not true. You told her I was struggling with the business," I said. "You made it sound like I am the one who cannot keep things together. That is going to get around to vendors, to customers who follow her posts." Kayla finally spoke up again, her voice softer now, almost reasonable. "Jess, you have always been the one who holds everything too tightly. Maybe this is a sign you need to let go a little. Let Andrew help more. You do not have to do it all alone." I looked at both of them standing in my living room in the house I had bought with money from the business they were now pretending had never really been mine to begin with. The air felt thick with the heat that had crept in through the open garage door earlier. I picked up my bag again. "I am meeting with a lawyer tomorrow, David Chin. If either of you moves any more money or touches the business accounts, I will have him file for an emergency order before the end of the week." Andrew's face changed completely then. The last trace of the patient husband disappeared. "You are really going to do this over $42,000. You are going to blow up our marriage and your sister's life because you cannot stand that someone else touched something you thought was only yours." I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. It was only mine. That was the entire point of the trust, and you knew that. You just decided it did not matter once you needed the money. I walked past them toward the bedroom to change into something cooler before I drove to the post office to drop the orders. Neither of them followed me, but as I closed the door, I heard Kayla say something low to Andrew that I could not make out, and his reply was short and sharp. When I came back out 20 minutes later, the living room was empty. Andrew's car was gone from the driveway. Kayla's door was still closed. I loaded the boxes into the trunk and sat behind the wheel for a moment, with the engine off, the heat already building inside the car. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. My chest still felt tight, but the tight feeling had shifted into something clearer. I had spent years telling myself that keeping the peace was the same as keeping the family, that if I just worked harder and asked for less, the people who were supposed to protect me would eventually stop taking. They were not going to stop, not on their own. I started the car and pulled out of the driveway. The rearview mirror showed the house getting smaller behind me. I did not know yet what the lawyer would say tomorrow. I only knew that whatever he told me, I was not going back to the version of myself who nodded and said it was fine when it was not. The flash drive was in my bag. The screenshots were backed up in 3 places. And for the first time since I had opened those bank statements, I felt something that was not just anger or shock. It felt like the beginning of a boundary I should have drawn years ago. The next morning, I drove across town to David Chin's office in a low brick building near the university. The waiting room was quiet, just a few people flipping through magazines while the air conditioner fought the desert heat. When David called me back, he was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with calm eyes and a stack of folders already on his desk. I handed him the flash drive and the printed statements without small talk. He read through everything in silence for almost 20 minutes. Then he looked up. "The transfers from the trust account were not authorized by you. The signature on at least 2 of the forms does not match the one on your driver's license or the business paperwork you brought. That is enough for a civil claim. The text messages and screenshots strengthen it considerably. Your husband and your sister coordinated this over months. They knew what they were doing. I nodded. My hands were folded in my lap steady. What happens now? We can file for an emergency injunction to freeze any remaining joint accounts and prevent further movement of business assets. We can also pursue recovery of the funds through civil court. It will not be fast and it will not be pleasant. They will likely claim it was a misunderstanding or that you gave verbal permission. But the paper trail and the deleted messages work in your favor. He paused, watching me. There's also the matter of your marriage. If you want to separate finances immediately, we can draw up the paperwork today. You do not have to decide everything at once, but the longer you wait, the more opportunity they have to move things around. I thought about Andrew's face the night before, the way he had tried to turn my caution into proof that I was the problem. I thought about my younger sister sitting on my couch acting like I was the one being selfish. The bitter taste in my mouth was familiar now. I want the accounts separated, I said, and I want them both out of the house by the end of the week. I will cover whatever legal costs that takes. David nodded like he had heard versions of this story before. We can have the papers ready by tomorrow afternoon. In the meantime, do not discuss the details with them. Document every conversation and change the locks if you feel unsafe leaving them in the house unsupervised. I left his office with a folder of my own and a clearer head than I had walked in with. The $42,000 was probably gone for good. Even if we won in court, collecting would take time and more money I did not want to spend. But the business accounts were still mostly intact. The orders were still coming in. The vendors still answered my emails. That was the part I could protect. When I got home, the driveway was empty. Andrew's car was gone. Kayla's door was open, her suitcases already packed and sitting in the hallway like she had been waiting for permission to leave. She was in the kitchen making coffee like it was any other afternoon. She turned when I came in. Andrew said you went to see a lawyer. He is really hurt, Jess. He thinks you are blowing this up because you have been stressed for months. He said if you just talk to him without the lawyer in the middle, you two can figure it out. I set my bag on the counter. Where is he now? He went to talk to Rachel. He wanted to explain things before any rumors got out of hand. He said you were making him look like the bad guy to people who do not know the full story. Of course he had. The social circle was already shifting. Rachel's text from the day before had been the first small crack. There would be more people who had only ever seen the version of me Andrew described when I was not in the room. I looked at my younger sister. She had tears in her eyes, now the kind that always appeared when she needed something to go her way. You do not have to do this, she said. We are family. Families work through things. Mom and Dad would be devastated if they knew you were talking about lawyers and kicking people out. I almost laughed at that. My mother, Patricia, had called once in the last year, mostly to ask if I could send money for my father's medical bills that insurance would not cover. She had not asked how the business was doing. She had not asked how I was. She had only asked for the check. Kayla, I said, keeping my voice even, I am not asking you to leave because I am angry. I am asking because you and my husband took money that was not yours and then tried to make me feel crazy for noticing. That is not family. That is theft with extra steps. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For a second, she looked like the little sister I used to defend on the playground. Then the look hardened. Fine, I will go. But do not come crying to me when you realize how alone you are going to be. Andrew is the only one who ever really understood how much pressure you put on yourself. Without him, you are going to burn out in 6 months. She grabbed her suitcases and walked out without another word. The door slammed harder than necessary. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, After the sound faded, listening to the quiet of the house, it did not feel like victory. It felt like the floor had been pulled out from under something I had been pretending was solid for years. Andrew came home around 7. He looked tired, the kind of tired that came from spinning stories all afternoon. He set his keys down and did not try to kiss me this time. Rachel thinks you are overreacting, he said. A couple of other people I talked to said the same thing. They think you are using this as an excuse to push everyone away because you cannot handle anyone helping you. I pulled the papers David had prepared from my bag and set them on the counter between us. These are for separating the accounts and removing you from the business authorizations. There's also a notice to vacate the house by Friday. You can fight it in court if you want, but the lawyers says the by usted to buy forged signatures on the trust documents will not look good for you. He stared at the papers like they were something dangerous. Like, you are really doing this after everything we built together. We did not build it together, I said. I built it. You took from it when it was convenient and called it teamwork. He picked up the top page, read it, then let it fall back onto the counter. You are going to regret this. When the business gets hard again and you do not have anyone to lean on, you are going to wish you had not burned every bridge. I thought about Lena, who had stayed late at the coffee shop helping me organize evidence. I thought about David Chen, who had not once asked me why I had let it go on so long. I thought about the customers who still placed orders every week and the vendors who respected my deadlines. The bridges that mattered were still standing. Maybe I said, but I would rather regret being alone than regret staying quiet while you and my sister treated my work like it was spare change in your pocket. He did not have an answer for that. He just stood there for another minute, then turned and walked down the hallway to the spare room where his things were still boxed from when Kayla had been staying there. I heard him moving around packing. I did not follow him. That night, I changed the locks myself with a kit from the hardware store. It took longer than it should have, and my hands shook a little when I tested the new key. But when the old one no longer turned in the door, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief exactly. Something closer to the first real breath I had taken in months. Over the next 2 weeks, the texts came in waves. Andrew wanted to talk like adults. My younger sister sent long messages about how I had always been selfish with money and how our parents were heartbroken. My mother, Patricia, called twice both times, leaving voicemails that started with concern and ended with guilt about tearing the family apart over a misunderstanding. I listened to the first one. I deleted the rest without answering. Rachel stopped texting. So did 2 other people from the market circuit who had always been friendly when Andrew was around. The social circle did not collapse all at once. It just quietly rearranged itself around the story he had started telling. I let it happen. Fighting it would have taken energy I needed for the business. The lawyer filed the papers. The court granted the temporary injunction on the accounts. David told me recovery of the full amount was unlikely, but we could probably get a judgment for part of it and use it to cover legal fees. I told him to do whatever made the most sense. I was not holding my breath for the money. I was holding the line on everything else. 3 weeks after I changed the locks, Andrew sent one last text at 2 a.m. It was long and rambling, full of the same lines he had used in the kitchen that last night. He said he had only been trying to help. He said I had forced his hand by being so closed off. He said my sister was struggling and I had the means to make it easier on everyone. He ended with, I hope you can live with what you did to this family. I read it once, then blocked the number. I did the same with my sister's number and my mother's. The silence that followed was not peaceful at first. It was heavy. Some nights I lay awake wondering if I had been too cold, too quick to cut the cord. Then I would remember the screenshots, the forged signatures, the way they had both looked at me like I was the problem for noticing what they had done. The business kept going. Orders came in. I hired a part-time packer for the busy weeks and started saying no to markets that required me to be away from the studio for too long. Lena came over twice a week to help with bookkeeping until I could afford to pay someone properly. David checked in every few weeks with updates that mostly said the same thing: slow progress. Some money might come back eventually. Focus on protecting what you still have. One evening in early fall, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the windows open, the dry Tucson air finally cooling enough to feel like something other than punishment. The house was quiet in a way it had not been in years. No one was waiting for me to finish an order so they could ask for money. No one was explaining why my boundaries were actually selfishness in disguise. I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder where I kept the screenshots and statements. I had not looked at them in weeks. They were evidence now, not a wound I needed to pick at every day. I moved the folder into an archive labeled closed and closed the laptop. The money was mostly gone. The family I had tried to keep together was gone too in any real sense. Some days that still hurt in a sharp, specific way that caught me off guard in the grocery store or while I was labeling packages. Other days it felt like the cost of finally being able to breathe without checking who was watching. I had not won everything. I had won the part that mattered most, the ability to decide what happened next without someone else rewriting the rules while my back was turned. That was not the clean victory people posted about online. It was messier, it left marks, but it was mine. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to choose between keeping a version of family that only existed when you stayed small and building something that actually belonged to you, I see you. Drop your thoughts below. What would you have done when the statement showed 0?